to Deep Sleep Stories. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep, a short review, comment, or sharing the podcast with someone who might benefit is a simple and meaningful way to support the show so that we may continue to offer it for free. Now, take a slow, gentle breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome and settle in with Deep Sleep Stories, where the night is unhurried and you don't have to do anything at all. Tonight's story is about Puddles and a single porchlight, and how gentle reflections can guide the heart into rest. You are here now, and that is enough. Let your shoulders soften as if they're slowly remembering how to be heavy in the safest way. Let your jaw loosen. Let your tongue rest comfortably in your mouth. If you can, allow your eyes to grow warm behind your eyelids, as though the darkness is a soft blanket being drawn up to your brow. Breathe in and feel the air arrive like a quiet visitor. Breathe out and let the day drift away from you like a paper boat pushed from shore. Somewhere beyond the edges of your awareness, there is a night that is kind and patient. The air smells faintly of rain and clean earth. A hush moves through trees, through rooftops, through the seams of the world. And you are invited to rest inside that hush. Take another slow breath in, as if you're sipping something soothing. And as you exhale, imagine the weight of your thoughts sliding down and away, like droplets traveling a window pane, leaving nothing behind but clear space. Now, without hurry, without effort, let the story begin. In a small town where the streets curved gently as though they were drawn with a careful hand, the evening rain had already finished its work. It had come softly, not with thunder or sharp wind, but with a steady, silvery patience. It had tapped the leaves and the rooftops. It had rinsed the brick and the stone, and then it had quietly stepped away, leaving behind a world that glistened. The town was the sort of place that welcomed quiet. There were sidewalks bordered by low hedges and gardens that tucked themselves close to porches. There were fences that leaned just slightly, not from neglect, but from age and familiarity. Rain barrels waited under eaves, full and content, and in the shallow dips of the street, puddles gathered like small, glossy mirrors, holding the night in their palms. A woman named Elowen walked along one of those streets, unhurried, her steps making only the faintest sound. She had lived in this town for a long while, long enough to know the names of the trees that lined the lanes, long enough to recognize the shape of each roof line against the sky. She knew which homes always left a light on late, and which gardens smelled sweetest after rain. Elowen had not set out with a purpose sharp enough to call a plan. She had simply felt the evening settle around her like a shawl, and she had followed the gentle tug of it. The air was cool, but not cold. It carried the scent of wet stone and damp grass, and something faintly floral, like a memory of blossoms, lingering in the dark. Her coat was light, her hands tucked loosely into the pockets, and her hair was pinned in a way that always came undone when the weather turned thoughtful. A few strands clung to her temples, as if the night wanted to keep them. Above her, clouds drifted in slow layers, thin enough to let the moon's brightness spill through, softening everything it touched. The moon didn't glare. It hovered like a lantern behind gauze, making the street lamps seem gentler too. Their light fell in warm pools, and between those pools the shadows rested, calm and deep. Yellowin's shoes avoided the biggest puddles, at first out of habit, but soon she stopped trying. The puddles were everywhere, and they were beautiful. Each one held a different piece of the world. In one she could see the quiet curve of a branch, beaded with rain. In another, the faint ripple of clouds, traveling slowly across the reflected sky. She paused beside a wide puddle near the curb and looked down. In its surface, the street lamp above her became a golden oval, slightly trembling. The light wasn't broken. It simply wavered, as though breathing. When Elowin leaned a little closer, she could see the details. The pale edge of the curb, the tiny specks of grit and sand, the thin stream of water that still slipped along the gutter, carrying a leaf like a small boat. For a moment she felt as if the puddle was not merely reflecting the town, but holding it gently like a cradle holds a sleeping child. She continued on. The town grew quieter the farther she walked from the center. Shops had long since dimmed their windows. The bakery's warm glow was gone, leaving behind only a faint sweetness in the air, as if the walls themselves remembered bread. A cat moved along a fence line, silent as fog, pausing to look at Elowin with calm curiosity before slipping away into shadow. The homes here were older, their porches wider. Some had swings that hung still, damp ropes darkened by rain. Some had pots of herbs, their leaves shining like polished stone. And many had porchlights, each one a small, warm promise in the night. Elowin liked porchlights. She liked the way they did not demand attention, only offered it. They were quiet guardians, standing watch over doorsteps and welcome mats, over the places where people left their muddy boots and hung their umbrellas to dry. As she walked, the puddles began to change. It was subtle at first. A puddle would catch a porchlight's glow and hold it longer than expected, so that the reflection seemed deeper, almost as if the puddle had a second sky beneath it. Another puddle would show the porchlight not as a simple shine, but as a delicate shimmer that made Elowin think of fireflies. She told herself it was only the angle of the light, the thin film of water shifting with her steps, the way the night always made familiar things look slightly enchanted. The mind she knew loved to soften edges in the dark. Still, she slowed, drawn by something she couldn't quite name. The street she had wandered onto was called Wrenlight Lane, though the sign at the corner was half hidden by ivy. Wrenlight Lane was narrow, its trees arching overhead like a patient canopy. The branches held droplets that occasionally fell with a tiny plink, a sound so small it seemed like the night whispering to itself. Halfway down the lane stood a house Elowen had not visited in years. It wasn't abandoned, it wasn't crumbling. It simply looked like it belonged to a different pace of time. The paint was a shade of soft cream, the trim a muted green. Vines climbed one corner in a careful pattern. And at the front, a porch stretched wide with steps that curved slightly at the edges, worn smooth by countless feet. A single porchlight glowed beside the door. It was not bright, it was not flashy. It was a steady, honey-colored light that made the porch railings look warm and kind. Beneath it on the wet sidewalk, a puddle lay like a polished stone, and in that puddle the porchlight shone with an unusual depth. Elowen stopped. Something in her chest softened, as though she had come upon a familiar song played very quietly. She didn't remember why this house mattered to her, only that it did. Memory, she knew, was not always loud. Sometimes it was a gentle pressure, a warmth that rose in the ribs and waited. She stepped closer, and the puddle's surface trembled. Not from wind. There was no wind. It trembled as though it had noticed her. Elowen looked down, and the porchlight's reflection stretched toward her, a ribbon of gold laid across dark water. The puddle was shallow, but it looked deep, the way certain nights looked deep when you stared into them. She crouched, careful not to touch the water. In the reflection, she saw the porchlight. She saw the porch railing. She saw the door with its old brass knob. All of it was normal, familiar, calm. Then, as she watched, the reflection shifted in a way that made her blink. The porchlight's glow seemed to become a path. Not a path on the sidewalk, but a path inside the puddle leading into the reflected world, as if the puddle were a doorway laid flat on the ground. Elowen did not feel afraid. The night was too gentle for fear. Instead, she felt the quiet kind of wonder that comes when something lovely happens without explanation. She leaned closer. The gold in the puddle flickered, and for a moment she saw something else in the reflection. The same porch, but with a rocking chair, moving slightly, as if someone had just risen. The same porch light, but with moths circling it in slow, dreamy loops. The same door, but slightly ajar. A sliver of warm interior light spilling out. Elowen's breath slowed. Her shoulders dropped another fraction. A droplet fell from the tree above and landed in the puddle with a soft plop. Ripples moved outward, and with them the image changed again, smoothing back into the simple reflection of porchlight and night. Elowen straightened and smiled in the dark. "Of course," she whispered, though she didn't know what she meant. She didn't go up the steps. She didn't knock. She simply stood there, letting the porchlight warm her face from a distance, letting the puddle shine at her feet. Across the street, another porchlight blinked on, as if answering. And in the shallow water along the curb, that second light appeared too, doubled and softened. Elowen began to walk again, slower now, as if she were walking through a thought she didn't want to disturb. With each porchlight she passed, the puddles seemed to brighten, their reflections deepening into little worlds. Aloan found herself pausing again and again, peering down as though she might see something that had been waiting for her all along. In one puddle, she saw a small kitchen window, fogged with steam, and behind it a person stirring something in a pot, their movement calm and rhythmic. In another, she saw a hallway with a coat rack and a scarf hanging from it, as if someone had just come in from the rain. The reflections did not feel like spying. They felt like glimpses of comfort itself, like the puddles were remembering the warmth that lived inside houses and offering it to the night. And then, as she neared the end of Wrenlight Lane, Elowen noticed something that made her stop entirely. A porchlight ahead was different. Not brighter, not newer, not grander, simply different in the way a certain note in a melody can be different, turning the whole song tender. The light had a softer halo, a glow that seemed to breathe. Beneath it, a puddle lay perfectly still, even though the gutter water moved around it in a thin stream. Aloan approached, drawn as if by a quiet thread. The house with the breathing light was modest, nestled behind a low stone wall. Its porch was small, with 2 chairs and a little table between them. A wind chime hung near the corner, still and patient. A potted fern drooped with rainwater, glossy and content. The porchlight was old, its glass slightly frosted, its metal frame dark with age. It looked like it had been there for generations, guiding people home through countless evenings. Elowen stepped to the edge of the puddle and looked down. The reflection was clear as a held breath. In the puddle, she saw the porch as it was, but also as it had been. She saw the chairs occupied by shadowy outlines of people who were not quite there, sitting close, hands wrapped around warm mugs. She heard, or thought she heard, a low murmur of conversation, the kind that doesn't carry words so much as warmth. She blinked, and the outlines remained. Her throat tightened with something gentle, not sadness exactly, something like gratitude or the ache of remembering kindness. The puddle's surface shimmered, and the porchlight's reflection widened into a soft golden circle. Elowen felt a sensation like being invited to sit down, to rest, to stop holding her own life so tightly. A small motion caught her attention. In the reflection on the porch's table, a teapot appeared, round-bellied with a lid that gleamed in the light. Beside it, 2 cups. Steam rose in a lazy spiral. Elowen looked up at the real porch. There was no teapot, no cups, only the chairs and the table. Empty, wet, waiting. She looked back down. In the puddle, the teapot waited as if it had been set there just for her. Elowen's breath came slow and easy. She did not question how a puddle could hold such things. The night had decided to be a little mystical, and she could accept that the same way she accepted moonlight on wet stone. She crouched again closer this time, and extended a finger toward the water without touching it. The puddle's surface responded with a faint ripple, as if it recognized the gesture. the golden circle became clearer, and Elowen felt, in a way that was more like sensing than thinking, that she could step into that reflection if she wished. Not with her body, perhaps, but with her attention, with the part of her that could wander without moving. And because she was tired in the deepest way, tired not only in her muscles, but in the places behind her ribs, she allowed herself to wander. In the reflected porch light, she imagined herself sitting in one of the chairs. The chair creaked softly under her weight. The air was warmer there, protected by the porch roof, scented with old wood and faint tea leaves. The rain was farther away, only a soft sound beyond the edge of the porch. She imagined lifting the teapot, feeling its warmth seep into her palms. She imagined pouring tea into one cup, then the other, the liquid amber and steady. She imagined steam rising to touch her face, carrying a scent that reminded her of calm afternoons and slow conversations. Somewhere nearby in that reflected world, someone sat across from her. Elowen didn't see their face clearly, but she didn't need to. The presence felt familiar in the way comfort feels familiar. The presence was quiet, patient, not demanding anything from her. The two of them sat without rushing. The porch light above them glowed like a small sun for night creatures, and the shadows beyond the steps stayed respectful, never pressing in. The street was quiet. The leaves dripped softly. The world felt held. Elowen took a sip of tea. It tasted like rain turned gentle, like warmth found after a long walk, like the moment just before sleep when thoughts begin to soften. She exhaled, and her shoulders loosened further. In the reflected world, the puddle was no longer a puddle. It was a small pond beside the porch steps, edged with smooth stones. The porch light's glow stretched across the pond's surface, making a bright path. On that path, tiny ripples moved as if something was swimming slowly beneath. Elowen watched, sleepy and curious. A small fish, silver as moonlight, glided up to the surface and then dipped down again. It moved with a dreamlike ease, untroubled by any urgency. The pond was its whole world, and that was enough. The presence across from Elowen shifted slightly, and she sensed a smile. Not a smile she saw, but one she felt, like warmth in her chest. The presence seemed to say, without words, that the pond had always been there, in a way, that every puddle was a possibility, every reflection a doorway into calm, that the porch light was more than a bulb. It was a promise kept by those who loved to leave a little light for the night. Elowen's eyelids grew heavy, even in her imagined seat. The tea warmed her from inside. The porch light's glow softened the edges of everything. The air hummed faintly, as if the whole world had settled into a lullaby. And then very gently, Elowen felt herself drifting back toward the real street, toward her own body standing by the puddle. She rose from her crouch. The puddle lay still and ordinary again, water, light, reflection. The porch was empty, the chairs were wet. The teapot existed only as a lingering feeling. But Elowen felt changed in a small, important way, as if she had been reminded of something her bones already knew. that softness could be found in unexpected places, and that rest could arrive like a porchlight turning on. She continued her walk, leaving the breathing light behind, but carrying its warmth with her. Wrenlight Lane ended at a small park where a footpath curved around a cluster of trees. The park was quiet, grass dark with rain, benches shining faintly. At the center stood an old fountain, silent for the season, its stone basin holding a shallow pool of rainwater. Aloan stepped onto the path and listened. A distant owl called once, then fell silent. Somewhere, water trickled from a drain pipe into a patch of leaves, making a steady, soothing sound. The town felt like it was holding its breath, not from tension, but from peace. Near the fountain, the path dipped, and rainwater had gathered there too, forming a wide puddle that reflected the sky. The clouds had thinned, and through the puddle, Aloan could see the moon more clearly, a pale coin resting on dark velvet. She stood at the edge of the puddle and looked down. The moon's reflection wavered slightly, and then, as if the night wanted to offer her one more gift, the reflection seemed to deepen. The moon in the water looked closer than the moon in the sky, as though it had descended just for her. Aloan watched without thinking too hard. In the reflection, the park looked subtly different. The trees were taller, their leaves shimmering with a faint inner light. The fountain's basin held not just rainwater, but a smooth, dark pool that seemed to go on. And around the edge of that pool, small lanterns glowed, tiny, warm points of light, like a line of fireflies, deciding to stay. Aloan's breathing slowed in sync with the gentle ripple of the puddle. She realized something else then, something that felt like a secret the town had been keeping for her. The porchlights and puddles were speaking to each other. The lights were sending warmth outward, and the puddles were catching it, holding it, reflecting it back into the world. A quiet conversation of comfort, carried by water and glow. She imagined all the porchlights in town, each one a small beacon, each one mirrored in countless puddles, a network of gentle lights, doubled and softened, turning the wet streets into a constellation. Aloan felt her own thoughts becoming part of that constellation. Softer now, less sharp around the edges. She turned away from the park and began to head home, taking the long way on purpose. Not because she wanted to stay awake, but because she wanted to move through the night slowly, as if she were smoothing a blanket over herself. As she walked, she noticed little things that felt newly tender. A gutter full of leaves making a tiny dam, the water slipping around it with quiet persistence. A spider web strung between two bushes, jeweled with droplets that caught the streetlight like pearls. The smell of wet cedar as she passed a fence made of old boards. A porch swing creaking faintly in the breeze that had finally arrived, gentle as a sigh. At a corner she paused beside a puddle that reflected a window with lace curtains. In the reflection, the curtains moved slightly as if someone inside had walked past, and for a moment Elowen felt the comfort of homes all around her. Rooms with warm lamps, beds with quilts, kettles cooling after tea. The town was full of sleeping people, and yet the night was not lonely. It was simply quiet. It was a space where everything could loosen. Elowen turned onto her own street, where the trees were smaller and the houses closer together. Her own home waited halfway down, modest and familiar. The porch light was on, casting a warm circle over her steps and the welcome mat. A puddle had gathered at the foot of those steps, as if it had been waiting for the light. Elowen stopped and looked down one last time. Her porch light reflected clearly, steady, and kind. The puddle did not show teapots or shadowy companions. It did not open into another world. It simply held the light and offered it back, a quiet doubling of comfort. And that was enough. Elowen climbed the steps, each one creaking softly under her feet. The porch boards were cool and damp. She reached for the doorknob, feeling the familiar smoothness of the metal. Inside, the air would be warmer. Inside, there would be the hush of her home, settling into night. Before she went in, she glanced back once more at the puddle. The reflection of the porch light shimmered faintly, as though waving goodnight. Elowen smiled. She stepped inside and closed the door with a soft, careful click. The sound was gentle, like the final page of a book being turned. She took off her shoes and set them neatly by the door. She hung her coat, smoothing the fabric once, as if thanking it for keeping the night's coolness at bay. In the quiet kitchen, she filled a kettle with water and set it on the stove, not because she needed tea, but because the ritual felt soothing. The kettle sat there like a small promise. She didn't turn the flame on. She simply liked knowing it was ready. She walked through her living room, where a lamp glowed low and the curtains moved slightly with the faintest draft. She paused to touch the window pane, cool beneath her fingertips, and watched a droplet slide down the glass outside, catching the porch light for a moment before disappearing into darkness. Then she moved toward her bedroom, where the sheets were turned down, inviting. The room held that particular quiet that belongs to late evening, a quiet that isn't empty but full of resting. Elowen changed into something soft. She washed her hands, feeling the warm water soothe her skin. She brushed her hair until it lay smooth, until even the small tangles of the day were gone. When she lay down, the mattress welcomed her, as if it had been waiting patiently. She pulled the blanket up, and the weight was just right. Not heavy, not light, simply present. Outside, the porch light continued to glow. Outside, puddles continued to reflect it. The town, damp and shining, held its own gentle lanterns, one by one, as if the whole world had decided to keep watch in the kindest way. Elowen's breathing slowed. Her thoughts drifted like clouds in thin layers. In her mind, she returned to Wrenlight Lane, to the breathing porch light, to the imagined teapot and the warm chairs. She didn't try to hold the image tightly. She let it float like a leaf on water. She let it soften at the edges until it became a feeling rather than a picture, a feeling of warmth, a feeling of being safe, a feeling of being allowed to rest. The rain had done its work, and now the night was doing its own. In the quiet beyond her window, water gathered where it pleased. Light fell where it was offered. Reflections shimmered and settled. Everything found its place without effort. Eloan's eyelids grew heavier. Her body sank a little deeper into the bed. The porch light outside remained steady, a small guardian of the doorstep, a gentle promise that there was always a way back to warmth. The puddles held that promise and made it softer. The whole town seemed to breathe with her, in and out, in and out. And now as the story slows, as the edges of it blur into comfort, you can let your attention drift the way Eloan's did, without needing to follow every detail. The night is kind, the air is cool and clean. The glow of a porch light is warm and patient. Somewhere, a puddle reflects the moon. Somewhere, a porch light watches quietly. Somewhere, the world is shining softly after rain, and you are allowed to sleep. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.